DC, Pentagon. I used to work at the command north. Yeah, and at Peak. Yeah, we were part of the Granite Pantry program. We upgraded the missile system. Nah, it's all
I lost it, I went to Pentagon, I lost my stuff that you're saying.
I know.
Yeah,
You don't have a need to know.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Welcome, we're glad you're here.
Good evening. I'm Acting District Secretary Nicole Gonzalez. It is Tuesday, October 1st, 2013, and this is a regular meeting of the Dublin Family Services District Board of Directors. Presiding this evening is President Don Benson.
Good evening. If you'd please, here, come to order. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Director Halkett?
Here.
Director Howard?
Here.
Director Duarte?
Here.
Vice President Juanita Leopold?
Here.
President Benson?
Here. Okay. Special announcements. I think we have one tonight.
Yes, President Benson, members of the board, it's my great pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Chris Gerdes, Garrison Commander at Camp Parks, to our board of directors. Chris has assumed command at Camp Parks in July of this year for what is to start off as a 2-year stay. Chris's previous engagement was at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and I also understand that you hail from my home state of Ohio. So,
Welcome, you're here.
Thank you very much. You know, I was remarking to some of the members before the meeting started that I've quickly learned since July, after assuming command, that Camp Parks is certainly not an isolated entity. And we rely on community involvement for a whole host of things, from mutual aid in the fire arena to services such as you provide. So community involvement is very important. So I'm enjoying this. This is a very unique assignment for an Army officer. I've spent most of my career playing soldier, and now I get to play city manager for an Army base. I'm learning something new every day, you know. So
Another career coming for you.
maybe a picture of this, who knows. So, but anyway, thank you, and thanks Bert for inviting me. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, because you certainly do a lot for us, please don't hesitate to give me a call.
Well, we think very highly of your command post, and especially during the fire, where you guys just hosted a whole group out there, and your whole base is very warm and welcoming. So
Yeah, that was a no-brainer of a decision. You know, the Cal Fire does a lot for us, and it was easy to make the decision to get back to them. So
well, welcome to Dublin.
thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, public comment. Do we have any blue cards? No? Okay. Reports. General Manager?
Yes, President Benson, members of the board, just a couple of quick things. You'll notice at the dais a couple of different faces. Nicole Gonzalez is sitting in for Nancy Gamble Hatfield, the district secretary this evening, and Levi Fuller is here again sitting in for Dan Gallagher. In terms of correspondence to or from the board, I want to call to your attention 2 things. We have a letter in front of you dated October 1st, 2013 from Chappelle Industries of Northern California, Dave Sugo in particular, related to the item you're going to be discussing under item 9B, which is the expired water and wastewater capacity rates. I think you all have that letter with you. There was also a letter received earlier this month, dated September 3rd, addressed to President Don Benson from Susan Marinishi and Mary Welsh. Susan's the county administrator for Alameda County, and Mary Welsh is the interim director of human resource services, and the letter's subject is Alameda County's 10th annual Disability Employment Awareness Conference and Training. That information is included tonight as well. I don't have anything else for the agenda, for my report, and from staff's perspective, the meeting will proceed in accordance with the agenda as laid
Okay, well, welcome Nicole and Fiona. Moving on to committee reports, anything, agenda management? Okay, approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion for the regular meeting of September 3rd? Seemed like such a long time ago.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. So moved. Consent calendar, 8A, B, and C. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. That brings us to 9A, board business. And that's reconsideration of the board's prior decision related to the safety officer position. Now, at this point, I would like to see if anybody wants to make a motion to open up this item.
I'll move to open this item for two reasons. One is, if any one director puts this much effort into something, I want to hear about it.
Okay.
As a courtesy. And secondly, because there may be some good arguments. I'd like to hear the arguments. So I'll move for opening this up.
Excellent. And do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right. That brings us to Director Duarte.
Yes. Well, as in the memo that I sent to the board, I got my report in place here. I wanted to make the comment that I certainly do not advocate not spending money for a safety position. It's just a question of my comments, which I want to rehash everything I said in the June meeting when we looked at this item under the budget. But because of my background, because of my experience, and because of my encounters with safety position and safety officers in the construction industry, specifically heavy civil construction industry, which correlates directly to what we do here at the plant. I went back this past week and spoke to two more contractors. Each of these firms are local. I'm not going to use their name, and I'm not going to disclose the salaries that they pay their safety persons, but I'm more than happy to give that information to both staff and to the board. But in a nutshell, both of these companies have in excess of 125 employees. Neither of these companies have a full-time safety officer. And the comment that, and I said, why not? That's a lot of people, a lot of job sites. And it's quite simply, once our safety programs are in place, the monitoring process becomes a part-time position. And we couldn't afford to have a full-time safety officer. One of these companies does 150 million a year, the other one does about 200 million a year. So these are not small contractors. So I think we are talking apples and apples. Be that as it may, the point that I've been trying to make all along is that given our plant and the safety culture that we have there, and the fact that this position has remained open for over, I think, almost over 2 years, that alone tells me that our safety culture for what it exists, as it exists now, is good. Otherwise, we would be experiencing a multitude of accidents. That's not to say that we can't improve. That's not to say that we don't need more training. All of the above. But when I look at the job description and I look at the salary, and everyone here in the district knows my feeling on that, it is incomprehensible to me that that type of a position would command that kind of salary. And the fact that we're being compared to 14 or 17 other public works agencies, which will all tell us that that's what they pay their comparable salary for their safety officer. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it justified. If we are transitioning to an O&M organization, as we all are very well aware, things have to change. And downsizing, more efficiency, that's the watchword for everybody, private and public sector alike. And we have to do our part. If in the slides that I've got, and I believe are we going to have that PowerPoint on the screen?
We can have it if you would like.
I'd like that. Okay. It's very short. It's only 6 slides. Given that fact, it's the savings that I was able to find out with this one consultant. It's not a lot of money in terms of our $15 million payroll. It's not a lot of money in terms of our budget, but it's a start. It's a start. And if we constantly go down the road that every time we fill a position, we fill it because, well, that's the way we've always done business. I don't think that's necessarily a 100% positive attitude to take. We need to be open to be thinking about different ways to save money and different ways to manage the workforce. This firm that I approached, I took them out to the plant, and Dan Gallagher was kind enough to show us around. I have no ties to this company. I never heard of this company until I went searching for some kind of a consulting firm that has a background in safety training. So they asked me, well, do you want us there tonight? I said, no, I don't. I don't want you here tonight because this is not an official proposal. This is simply a game plan, if you will. And it shows what can be done. I said, well, I don't want you to come in here and propose something that is not realistic. It's under in hours, under in money. I said, I want you to be as conservative as possible. And I looked at his numbers after he did it. So he did it without my input. He visited our website, he looked at our organizational chart, he looked at the plan. And this is what he came up with. You know, there's only 2 slides on their background. They're an employee-owned company, headquarters in LA. They provide environmental, health, safety, and sustainability consulting. There's the team members. Mark Dollinger is the person that I've been talking to. He's an engineer by education. He has the certified safety professional. Certification. And there's the other 2 people that would be working on it, if there were to be a contract. In terms of safety experience, they have safety experience with comprehensive identification of hazards, etc., for the Department of the VA Central Plant in Los Angeles and San Diego. They've done job hazard analysis and safety training for the aerospace contractors, PPG and Woodward, and they developed written health and safety programs for construction and industrial projects. That's all I wanted to say about their background. So, next. So I said, we sat down together and I said, how do you see this? And I asked him to come up with his outline and I gave him my thoughts. Here's what we see as key elements that would absolutely have to be provided to the district. Review on-site safety manuals, SOPs, other relevant material. Estimated effort, 60 hours. This is just so he can come in and review what we've got in terms of physical plant. Identifying safety-related gaps in written and operational procedures for the operator, maintenance, and office employees. Another week. That's 40 hours. That's a lot of review time. identifying training needs, developing the training program and implementing. 60 hours. 60 hours, when you figure that the average class really shouldn't be more than 2 hours long, and we have multiple shifts that have to come back, you can't, you've got people working 24/7. So we can't have one class and expect everybody to be there. We're going to have multiple classes. More than 2 hours in a safety class is not going to be effective. You're going to lose their interest, but more importantly, these folks are busy. They've got other things to do. They've got jobs to do. So a 2-hour class is the right length for safety-related subject matter. 2 into 60, that's 30 sessions. That's a class every other week. I think that's probably what it would take. And then providing a qualified safety person to be present on site for 2 days a week, full-time, for 40 out of the 52 weeks. That's 800 hours of consulting time where they're on site. And then providing safety management for our safety committee, another 60 hours. What's that work out to? Again, not going on the cheap, but what proper consulting rate should go for. There's the breakdown. It comes up to $103,000, and with reimbursables, we're looking at $112,000. But more importantly, after the first year, you're eliminating most of tasks 1 and 2 because you're in an update and maintain mode. Reducing the tasks from 4 to 2 days a week saves approximately $38,000. So the annual cost beginning the second year is over $60,000. Are those numbers absolute? No, I'm not saying that we make a decision based on that. But what I'm asking you to do is look at the concept here. Look what we're talking about, and realize that we budgeted almost $200,000. I think it bears a reconsideration. And in the recent chain of events about our organization and our org chart, I think we should consider at least tabling this for a while. You don't have, at least in my opinion, Lori would be able to tell me about the budget itself, but I don't think it necessitates a change to the budget right now. But when you look at these kind of numbers, I just don't see the justification in spending that kind of money for what I do not see yet. And even after I read the job description, it just blew me away when I looked at all of it. It's 4 pages long. Still doesn't matter. It's not a full-time job. Anybody has questions?
Questions? Comments? Directors? Thank you for your presentation. For me, I think it's very thought-provoking. I think it's something that is definitely worthwhile looking into. And for that reason, it's time to relook and revisit this situation. But that's my comments. Anybody else?
Tending to agree. Too bad Mary's not here. She was pretty advocate of this. Kind of like to know what a full-time person does, 40 hours a week. When in the hours day, it doesn't take 40 hours. Lose half. So, what do they do?
I saw in the job description that there's some other duties there that were not, shall we say, purely OSHA-type safety duties, such as the emergency preparedness plan, such as the insurance for the vehicles, the insurance program for the vehicles. I can't speak to that because I wasn't aware this person would be doing that, but I would think that the insurance of the vehicles program management plan would be in another department, not safety. The emergency preparedness plan, absolutely. But again, you don't work on that 5 days a week. or one day a week. You put together a plan, and we have a good plan in place. You tweak it, you monitor it, you update it, but that could still easily be done by a part-time person, in my opinion. I don't want our staff, and especially the folks out at the plant, to think that I'm trying to shortchange them by taking away a position that is needed. We need safety culture, safety programs, safety training. Absolutely do have to need it. But I can tell you, I'm coming from the private sector, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job, 52 weeks a year.
Okay. Georgie?
When Ed first brought this up, I went along with the rest of the board because I have a problem when we're trying to go back in and change things that are contractual. And I don't want to do that to the employees in any way, shape, or form. And I thought maybe we could deal with this again when the contracts are open. However, he brings up a really good point that maybe we need to start considering as we get into the operation and maintenance function. It's very common. I mean, I came from a city where virtually everything is contracted. We have very few employees at the city. And maybe it's time to think about having this position contracted because it isn't a full-time position, one. And two, we get the benefit of the broad range of experience and expertise these people have, and still get the job done. Obviously, being empty for 2 years tells me that it's not critical. However, we did say in our goals that it's very important, and I agree, it's very important. We need to get the programs back operating, and whatever deficiencies we've had in the last 2 years need to be brought up to snuff. But I also know that staff has interviewed people. They're just waiting to make offers. I think this is sort of a bad time to be having this. But I do agree with what he's saying. You've heard me say it for years. We pay a lot of money that in the outside world wouldn't happen. We all know that. That's what public agencies have been accused of for years. And the only way to stop it is to do something like Ed is suggesting. So I have to say right at the moment, I'm on the fence. I think it's a good alternative to an employee. It will keep the cost down. We won't expand employees. I don't want to mess with the contract though. I don't want the employees to think that, we're digging in and trying to change things, because I don't ever want to do that. But in this particular situation, I think Ed's got a good idea.
Director Albert?
I was going to be quiet, but I can't.
Come on.
So I have two major issues with what you said about here. Part of it harkens back to our city experience with the PFP. And a body like ours, when we make a decision, there's a notion that it really should be final. So the only way to get from here to there would be to reopen the budget and deauthorize the headcount, which I think technically should have been done the next meeting after we adopted the budget, but I'm not going to get technical on people. When we get into a culture where we think that, I didn't like that decision the board made, I'm going to come out and take another run at it in a couple months. That can be caustic to a body like ours, due to our experience with some ex-board members that we work with. So, I'm always reluctant to reopen something we've already decided. Very willing to change my mind and make a change in course the next time it makes sense. The next time we're doing it, when you use the next budget cycle. And then I would turn your attention to attachment 6, which is most of the way through the clarification. You know, there's a letter from CSRMA, that's page 2 of 3, and page 3 of 3 are the ones of interest to me. With, you know, the chart, the staffing for risk control, and it's important that this position is called safety officer, because it's really it's safety risk management is super nuts. I'm not sure comparing it to a construction company is exactly analogous, because, you know, we do some construction, actually not a lot of it. We have 2 industrial facilities, and we have a lab. And we have vehicles, and people driving all over the place and stuff. So, you know, we do have a different characteristic than a construction company. If you look at the table, and I know the people on the internet can get to it as well, with the proposed staffing of 1 officer for 109 employees, we're way on the outside bounds of kind of understaffing the employees per safety FTE. You know, 109 employees per 1 safety FTE. A lot of these other agencies are operating at 38, 40, 42, 50 and such. Interesting, you know, you compare yourself to your peers and see how you're doing. The one that actually I find more troubling, you know, is the next page. You look at the workers' comp XMOD, and just like that, my role manufacturing company that I'm CFO for, I have my workers' comp insurance, and you know, it's like I'm just bringing 0.78 or so is great, but you know, there's a definite trend up from when the officer position was removed during the budget cycle of fiscal year 10. You know, that's 2 things. Everyone whose numbers moving up is somebody being hurt. I desperately don't want my employees to be hurt. There's a financial impact as well. You know, I won't attribute it to not having a safety officer at the time, because I was on this body when we actually had an employee die on the job. It's certainly nothing that I ever want to go through again. And if there's anything that having a full-time risk mitigation safety person on board can help to mitigate that, make sure we never have to go through that again, I support it. So, not want to go back on our decisions. I think it is a broadly drawn position that does more than just, you know, industrial safety. They have the entire operations plus risk mitigation. Our workers' comp XMOD certainly changed in many directions since we have not had this position. And the fact that what we're proposing to do is on the outer bounds of what other agencies are doing. You know, 109 FTE for 1 safety officer versus many of the other agencies. I really think we should leave all that alone.
Good point. Okay.
We can motion or something.
So let's do a motion. So I guess the motion would be to reopen this up? Or we've already reopened it up?
Yeah, let me speak to the process. We've already reopened the motion, so we're basically deliberating Director Barkey's proposal. You're not calendar to take any action, because we didn't know, quite frankly, what action exactly to calendar. So the nature of your deliberation should be with a motion and a second and an affirmative vote to direct staff to bring back something to you for implementation, whether it be a budget reduction in the staffing levels or whatever it is your pleasure. You know, basically you're seeking direction from not to actually take the action to make this final, because we couldn't agendize it without knowing what your action was going to be.
If we referred it to a committee, what committee would it go to?
It was handled by personnel through the budget process. We kind of documented a lot of budget deliberations and strategic plans, so went through the personnel.
Okay. So do you want it to go back to personnel?
I think given the nature of this, we should go through the formal motion second vote process.
Okay. So that would mean that, do I hear a motion to bring it back to personnel?
I'll move that.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Now do I have discussion?
I discussed that.
Okay, we've discussed. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 322.
President Benson, if I could have a little clarification so we can adequately prepare for the personnel committee. You're referring, what exactly are you referring back to the personnel committee? And perhaps that's a question for the maker of the motion.
Well, let me back up for a second. When Rich pointed out the fact that we made a decision prior, you'll recall, and under the budget, when the budget was presented to us, that position was there. So the only way that I could object to it would be not to vote for the budget. So that doesn't leave me much options for trying to effect any kind of change. At this point in time, I'd like to be sent back to personnel to give me another argument as to why they feel that this position should be full-time. I've made my argument, but what I see here is the XMOD going up in the last 3 years could be due to a lot of things. It could not necessarily absence. We're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to make any changes if we're not willing to step up and voice our opinion. In saying that we don't want to go back on our word, I don't buy that. I don't buy that for the simple reason that we are accountable to the public. We are accountable to the public first and foremost, and to our employees second. And that doesn't mean that it has to be a battle. It means that we have to work for the good of both sides. So if the committee if the personnel feels that this is adamantly that we have to fill this position, the board's going to vote that in. There's nothing I can do about it. And if it takes a change in the MOU later, 4 years, we're talking 3 years down the road, we haven't made a difference.
Director Markey, with all respect, what I'm trying to ascertain is, given the fact that what I understand you're trying to do is reverse a previously made board direction, so we have decided policy here. I understand you don't agree with it necessarily, but what I'm trying to ascertain is specifically what question am I to take back to the personnel? Is it reducing the head count by one person? Is it perhaps opening negotiations with the mid-manager, or I guess this would be a professional marketing position, about the salary structure? Is it a budget adjustment for the position? Because the reason I'm asking those questions specifically is because since it's decided policy, no action on part of the committee or board sustains previous direction. So I kind of need to know how to frame the question to the committee, how to prepare them.
Is it more justification of the position?
I think it's justification of the full-time position.
full-time position.
I think that's the crux of it.
So you're looking at if I could, you're looking at the committee to re-examine the authorization of the FTE for the safety officer in this year's budget, this year's head.
Yes.
Okay, so the committee would look at
That's you and I.
personnel, that's true.
Yeah, that's you and I.
Okay, so the committee would look at that and come back to the board with what? A recommendation to reopen or not?
I believe the issue has been reopened. That was your motion today. When a committee deliberates, you can come back to the board. The committees can't make a decision.
Yeah, that's right.
So a committee can come back to the board with a recommendation to modify the budget. The committee could come back with a recommendation to conceivably, I guess, to modify the budget. That was the motion. If there's no recommendation back from the committee, or if there's a split recommendation from the committee, basically board policy stands at that point. And that would be reported back to this board as such. So it's a little bit, the way we're set up is to actually, take votes to do something. It's a different process to unwind the decision.
So we could, is it possible to have that ready for the next personnel committee, which is next Monday?
Well, it depends on how much detail you want. We can simply put on the committee agenda the material that's been before and open up the discussion and see where it goes. The other thing, just
Because I don't want to drag it on.
to put a timing, we have completed the interview process for the position. We recruited. We're in a position of making an offer to the candidate. We've identified who the candidate's going through the background screening right now. So, we are prepared to move. If it were the collective board's decision to keep the position, I would hate to have to spend the money to restart that whole recruitment process. So one favor I would ask the board is to, in the deliberations, whatever decision you're going to have, make the decision quick.
Yeah, well, I want to make it quick because of those.
Then discuss it at the next
We'll,
committee meeting.
we'll discuss it next
I
committee
mean,
meeting
there's
and then put it on the.
certainly enough documentation here.
Right, we have plenty of documentation, but we could put it on agenda item for the next board meeting.
And just, Nicole, just to confirm, the next personnel committee meeting is Monday, and that'll set it up for the 15th.
Right, that's it.
And if the committee decides not to bring something back to the board, then ask you.
We would, at that point, according to your guidelines, we would report the committee's deliberations in the minutes to the board. And then if a board member does not accept those committee deliberations, it would be up to him or her to ask to have a re-agendized for discussion.
Okay. Does that sound fair enough?
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Appreciate the opportunity to make that one.
Okay. Thank you. Good detail. It's always good, thought-provoking that. All right, next up, Agenda 9B, resolution addressing expiring water and wastewater capacity rights and rescinding resolutions number 23-11 and 7-13. And I see that we have some folks here this evening as well. Good to see Bob and Boo.
Yes, thank you, President Benson, members of the board. I'm going to very quickly turn this over to Mr. Requar, perhaps, as well as the Finance Committee, because I was absent during the discussion of this matter before the Finance Committee last week. We basically, as I understand it, deliberated the recommendation that I put forward, and essentially, the committee is essentially recommending that recommendation for action by the full board. Again, I would call to your attention a letter from Chappelle Industries and Northern California, which is before you. So I'm not really in a position to say much more than that.
Okay, just real quick in background, we came to the board 4 meetings ago with a proposed resolution, and discussed it with the board. The resolution would propose to extend connections that have been purchased indefinitely. However, if they weren't used in 3 years, there was a true-up fee that was calculated from the time they purchased the connection until they actually used it. During board discussions, there seemed to be a consensus on the board to change the true-up fee from when the capacity was purchased to the point when it would have expired. In other words, 3 years later, or because we've had several resolutions changing the length of time, 5 years later, 4 years later, there's variations. The board also discussed to extend the time, and a couple of resolutions we've had, both to pay either $1,000 or $1,500 to extend the time a little bit because of the financial situation. The board discussed that at the consensus. The board also discussed a little bit about the concerns of capacity rights available forever, and does that limit us in the future? We did not address that in here. On that issue, we feel, A, that there's adequate work in the code, words in the code that allow the board to make that decision later if we come up with a shortage capacity to suspend use of permits. So we went back with that consensus on potential, what we thought was consensus on one item, no consensus on the other item, and rethought the issue. You've heard from the developers a number of times the financial burden to purchase capacity when they first take plans out and start building in the district, because sometimes it takes a year or 2 years before they actually get the first house in the market. And so it kind of constricts their time. The other thing is, you think about moving into a maintenance organization. We don't have as many big projects as Bath and Boston. We're they're kind of smaller projects, and the way the economy is, they're kind of spreading out. So staff rethought that and revised our recommendation a little bit. The first phase of the recommendation is the resolution you have before us, which simply takes all the existing capacity that's been purchased and the capacity that will be purchased until a code revision is implemented, so that when the developer purchases it, it has a life, whatever the existing life is, or it's newly purchased before the code comes up, it'll have a 3-year life. If they don't use it in that time, it does extend continually, but there will be a true-up fee for that after the expiration date, the delta between the connection fee at the time that would have expired and the connection fee when they actually use it as measured by building permit. The second step that we're proposing is bring you a code amendment, which we want to get done by the first of the year, that all future connection fees would be paid at the time building permit is issued. That would change developers writing $1 million check for 30 homes or whatever, to probably writing a check, they take building permits out, 3, 5, 10 homes at a time in the development. And so that would affect their cash flow through it. Would affect our cash flow a little bit, as we wouldn't get the big checks anymore, and there'd be a little slow period until the process found out. But money would come in a little smaller pieces along the way. As part of the finance committee, Lori provided some background information, financial impacts of both extending and when we extended and what those could be, and so I will let her address that issue.
We took a look at the financial analysis of the proposal as it was discussed in the last board meeting, and that information is included in the packet. The resolution as it's currently written will generate, it's estimated around $100,000. There is a significant revenue gap in the water fund because of the delay in implementation of the increased fee and the rush to counter, and that's detailed in the report as well. So from a financial perspective, my personal feeling is that I don't feel that the revenue that will be generated from this program is material in a way to cover that gap. So at some point, the board will have to wrestle with how you're going to cover the gap in the expansion fund for continuing to pay the debt and for the projects, future projects. Okay. Comments?
Actually, I'm thinking more about the second step. Okay, the developer comes in and wants to build 100 houses, but he takes out these permits and fixed later. Is there a situation where from day one, we have to build the rest? And so we're getting this money, piecemeal.
But you can comment on moving to a maintenance program. Most of our facilities are not constructed. We do have eventually 2 more reservoirs to build, but they aren't. When we first started out, you can imagine that the city wanted to develop a lot of places, we were constrained their development. So we have to build a reservoir that maybe a couple hundred houses associated with it. One over here, maybe 500 houses, and eventually there's infill. The development now is pretty much, from a reservoir point of view, is infill. So we don't have this, we aren't facing that same situation again. And will we get to the point where we have to do some more finance for a reservoir? Potentially.
The answer to your question is we were faced with a situation just like we were faced with on reservoirs as well as on bottom. We do take less than infrastructure up front. The answer is finance. If you have money to do it, and that goes in the pieces.
I'm just wondering, there's a lot of talk about the Bay Area plan for building, and changes to make Dublin even more dense. Because the plan, the situation come along where you got to build big stuff.
The answer is theoretically yes.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I could tell you though, most days, the majority of it, like Peter building, Peterson. Very few agencies collect like we do. A number of agencies require the developer in an area where there's neither reservoir, don't actually build a reservoir, and the agency pays it back over time. The developer carries the money. We do it that way.
These are all good questions. These are, the matter that's on the table is the resolution to extend the life
Yeah.
capacity piece. One of the items in that resolution is directing staff to bring back a code revision to do what we're talking about. So that's perhaps, and those are separable issues.
Yeah, that's why I said.
And that's one of the reasons why we broke them apart, because this is a complicated discussion. But
Well, I'm in favor of part one, and we can vote on that tonight, and then we'll see what part two.
Because part one can extend for, you know,
Yeah.
as Maria went up, there's some administrative work to keep up
Yeah.
with. But now that we are selecting zone 7 connected feed based on building permit, we've got the infrastructure for it. You know, the thing, it will take more time. And you can imagine it costs so much dollars to process a check. And if you get a developer, rather than be one check, you get 15 checks for a development, and that's more administration time.
Okay. So, do I hear a motion for step 1 and step 2?
No, there is no.
Step, just step 1.
yeah, the recommended action is to approve the resolution.
Approve the resolution.
The staff report just sort of describes this two-step process.
So,
One thing that I did mention, another reason for the change, the developers are facing a deadline near the end of the year of a lot of permits expiring, which is causing some angst. We can do a resolution tonight. A code revision takes a couple readings, a long period of time. So we can get the developers level of comfort today in their financial situation, and we can discuss the long-term, how to go about it, a little more if we need to.
Okay, so this resolution basically would approve step 1 and recommend step 2.
Go back.
Go back to
talk to
two.
you.
And I would move for approval of that.
okay, do I hear a second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so moved. Okay, thank you. Okay, wow. Now that timeline is coming down. All right, we'll move on to board member items. Thank you for coming. Board member items, shall we start with Director Duarte? Fine.
Afternoon, my report. My written report for the CASA conference.
Okay.
Approval last.
Okay. Director, President Von Meter Leopold.
I have two items. A last special districts meeting, a director from, oh, I turned it already. A director from Union Sand, is it Union Sand or Alameda County Water District? Gave us a presentation on this new book that's just been published in February, the Alameda Creek Watershed Historical Ecology Study. It was done in February, San Francisco Estuary Institute. It was one of the best presentations we've had at a special districts meeting in a long time. This book is fascinating. It shows the original alignment of the various mochos and arroyos, and you get a good understanding of how we ended up where we are, and you know, the things that we're doing wrong because, well, I shouldn't say wrong, the things that aren't working right because we really aren't following the watershed the way they should be. Really enjoyed the presentation, and it was, like I said, it was from a brand new well, 2-year board member, so it was kind of surprising. He just fell in love with it and has really studied it, can answer all sorts of questions about this area, which was surprising because he's not from this area. So that was my report for the special districts meeting. And then just as an aside, I've been appointed to the CASA program committee starting next week. And that's all I have.
Okay. Director Albert? Director Albert? Okay. I too also went to the special districts meeting. I really enjoyed this presentation. I was fascinated with how this watershed was developed and actually discovered, because they discovered it by accident coming over from Santa Cruz area. And then they found this whole fresh body of water. So it was and Zone 7 was a great host. And I too enjoyed the presentation. It was very fascinating. And I want to read that book as well. So with that, we will be going into closed session. At this time, the board will be going into closed session for 4 closed session items listed on the agenda. While this board meeting will continue, this broadcast will be stopped at this time because it is anticipated that there will be no report from closed session. And I'd also like to thank our guest coming today. Thank you, Frank. And also, if there's a report from closed session, it will be announced in the open session at the end of the board meeting. If you're interested in what report out, if any was made, you may contact the acting district secretary, Nicole Gonzalez, during our regular business offices. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
And President Benson, for the record, the attendees from staff that will be attending closed sessions A and B will be myself, Mr. Requa, Lori Rose, and Carl Nelson. And for items C and D will be myself and Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
I love that.
So $19. Where'd you get it? On Amazon? Pardon me? 19. 19.
That's it?